Hey everybody, so sorry this has been a couple of weeks since I've done this. I'm trying to get into better habits with this. I think one of the big issues is that I just need better background. I've always been trying to fight with the background and figure it out. So hopefully this is a little bit better. You can see I've got my Osama bin Laden wanted poster. I've got my Army Reservist. What the fuck am I doing here? I joined for the college money. Some wood burnings. I've got a nice a calendar with nothing filled in on it. So the normal things that are in the background, and also the nice logo displayed there. Hopefully, going to brand us a little bit more with the big hammers and sickles. Speaking of hammer and sickles, check out these cool. I don't know what. So I've been ordering a shitload of Soviet pins and really been enjoying. But I get these big buttons too, and it's hard for me to like really kind of. I sell the pins as like blind bags, but these are a little bit harder to deal with. So I think I'm gonna start just kind of doing an extra. Hey everybody, kind of jump in because some of like look, it's a little tiger, and some of they're not. There's a wolf. They're not necessarily. Look at this guy. Look at that guy. Look at that wolf. That is a fucking sweet ass Soviet cartoon wolf right there. You know that he's about to squat down and start drinking some vodka and smoking a cigarette. That's what that guy's doing. So I don't know. I think I'll start just kind of throwing those in some of the orders. But I really love getting the Soviet pins. Really, the reason why I'm buying them in bulk and breaking them apart and cleaning them up and then selling them is because I want pins. Because also, as you can see here, my little pin board. This is my little pin board. Those up there are the pins that I've had made. Those are the ones you can find in my store. So some of these are, some of them are Disney, some of them are non-Disney. But I got my little Soviet thing over there. I just look. No one on this website on this podcast is gonna try to blow smoke up your ass about how great the Soviets were. They weren't. They were shitheads. But I do like pins, and I don't know, like they were the other world power at the time. Nobody else was on our level except for the Soviet Union. So they're like this weird boogeyman that you kind of grew up with, especially if you're my age. Like I'm going to be 38 this year. I'm almost 40. So like you grow up with like communism just being the things like, well, it's bad. And then you grow up and you're like, well, communism isn't necessarily great, but it's got some good ideas. But you kind of refine your beliefs on it. But also, I just love pins, and I love that the Soviet Union made pins for everything. They just would make a pin and just be like, "Look, you grew great wheat. Here's a wheat pin." One of the ones I have is a recreation of a hemp growing pin, which I have yet to come across an original. I've only seen pictures of them online, but I do have my recreation, so they're a little bit nicer. They're not going to be all banged up and everything. So really, that's where like I know like it feels like I've been leaning more on a lot more hammer and sickle and a lot more Soviet stuff recently, and that's just because I really enjoy these pins and I really enjoy selling them. I like sharing them, so that's why. If you're wondering, it's like, why is Francis suddenly somewhat becoming a tanky? I'm not. I just like pins. That's where all that comes from. So let's go ahead and wanted to bring a little bit of news over. It's February, time of this recording, the 9th of February in the evening. And surprisingly, the military is still having these questions of what do we do about the white supremacists in the military. Now, there's been a lot of really great stuff that's been happening, a lot of relaxation of some grooming. Well, I don't want to say relaxation of grooming standards because that makes it sound like you can just be gross and do whatever. But there are relaxations on how women can wear their hair. It's not quite where it really should be, but it's progress. You make little steps until you've got something that's halfway decent. But this one from the Washington Post, this is seeking to combat extremists in the ranks. The military struggles to answer a basic question: how many are there? This is a good fucking question. I think really what we have to ask is what do you consider an extremist? Like, what are ideas that you consider an extremist? And we've got obviously, like, somebody who is anti-Semitic, openly racist, openly nationalist, kick them all out and let's just have a white country. Yes, extremist. But come down the slide a little bit, and then you get into what about if what about all the people who have just mentioned in my in my area, in my sphere of hearing, that we should just glass Iran or glass Iraq, or we should just bomb them all, or they're just a bunch of just the racism and everything that's already in the ranks. That's the shit that leads to what you had on January 6th. That's what fucking feeds into extremism. So I mean, it's, again, the military does this thing where it sees that there's a problem, right? Sorry, I'm bumping all up against this. It sees that there's a problem. And it says, well, what do we do about said problem? And the thing is, what they're looking at is a symptom. It's not the disease. The disease is the military is just toxicness is kind of imbued in it. And I'm not saying masculine toxic masculinity. I just mean from day one, the whole thing is shut up, do what I tell you, and I'm going to teach you how to kill shit. That's like 9 weeks of your fucking life. It's to break you down to build you back up. And what it does is it brings you back up into a person of violence. Not necessarily a violent person, but a person of violence. So when you ask how many extremists are there, that really depends on, are we talking about people who join the military already with extremist views, like somebody who's a member of the KKK or a member of Atomwaffen or whatever, just like, I'm going to go join the army, I'm going to go become an infantryman, I'm going to learn all these things, and I'm going to take it back, and I'm going to recruit in the ranks. Yeah, fine, that's great, but the problem is why is it so easy for him to fucking recruit in the first place? That's, why is it that somebody who is an open Nazi or an open white supremacist can recruit people in the military? And I think that really that's where, you've got this high level problem that you're trying to figure out. And it's like, man, if you just start cutting this shit off down at the bottom, it's going to wither. If you cut it at the root, man, the vine withers and dies. We know that. But that's the problem. They're going after the vines, and they're not just like, why don't we get down there and fucking root out the shittiness, the real racism and problems that we have going on. You're not going to have that happen because honestly, it kind of comes with the territory. We're violent people. When I was in Afghanistan and when I was in Iraq, when you go out on patrols and you go out and do stuff like that, I didn't do it often because I'm public affairs, but I did go in bed with infantry and with MPs and all these kind of people who would go out and about. Work with some SF at one point, and you know what? It's the same. Even yourself, you steel yourself. If it happens, I'm not shooting people. I'm shooting enemies. I'm shooting targets. I'm shooting, the bad guys. And you're not thinking, oh, well, it's the people. And that's a difficult thing to swap back and forth between. It's difficult to say, on one end, okay, if we get ambushed, fuck it, I'm going to kill everything. Anything that moves, I'm gunning it down. And then 2 days later, you're expected to go and make small talk with a tribal local, and you might think well, this guy could have been shooting at me 2 days ago, or an elder may have been sending his people against us, and so but also may not have. But you always have to keep that, you always have to have that mentality, because that's what keeps you alive. And that's the fucking problem, is that and therein comes our issues of where how do we effectively do a mission without being massive assholes? And I don't think we can, because when you are an organization that requires violence, and it requires the ability to other somebody so that you can kill them and not feel remorse afterwards, is a hard ledge to come down off of and slide back down into okay, these are people. They're deserving of these, they're deserving of somebody to talk to them and to reason with them and to find out their wants and needs and desires and blah, 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 hearts and minds. But it's hard to do that when fucking 3 days ago, you're trying to shoot their minds out of their bodies. So violent extremism, it's just really I don't know what anybody else wants to be done here, because there's nothing else that can be done. You are not going to root out the violent extremists. There's not going to be a CID investigation that's going to like, here it is. We found all the white supremacists. What it comes down to is fucking Joe Schmo needs to say, hey man, this guy keeps saying some really fucked up racist stuff. I should report him because it's fucked up and racist. And then you need a chain of command that's like, whoa, I can't believe that would happen. Yeah, we need to get that person either rehabilitated in some way or we need to get them out of the military because we have no place for that. And unfortunately, we just don't have that. We don't have that lower structure. We don't have something that is down at the private, the sergeant, the lieutenant level that's probably like you're just expected to be able to handle it. And the thing is that there's so many like steps up the rungs that you got to hit, and like at any point in time, one of those steps might just cut out from underneath you. What do you do? What do you do when you're the lieutenant and your captain won't listen to you? What do you do if the colonel won't listen to you? What do you do when the sergeant major doesn't listen to you? Like, what do you do when these upper echelon people, who a lot of them talk real fucking pretty games on Twitter, but what do you do? What do you like? How and once you do, if a report is taken seriously, how is that handled? You know, how do you actually do like? Yes, we need to figure this out. Hey, look, we cracked open the wall locker and we found a bunch of fucking Nazi paraphernalia in there. Perfect, get them out. But what happens when you crack it open and you just find some like some real Confederate ass literature in there? Or what happens when you open it up and there's a bunch of Tucker Carlson books and Bill O'Reilly books and like, books that are not considered extremist because they're written by like everyday pundits. But I mean, come on, like Ben Shapiro fucking didn't specifically say go shoot up a bunch of people, but I mean his rhetoric does suggest that the only thing that somebody could do to protect themselves against the Democrats is to go murder people. So what the question just comes down to, what is extremism? What do you consider extremism? We need to create that baseline because we need to figure out if what you consider extremism is correct. And if it isn't, we need to lower the bar down a little bit to say, well, what else needs to be considered extremism? Which is always going to be hard because then, say what do we fucking ban Tucker Carlson? Do we ban Fox News from places? I mean, like CNN is not as violent, but it's also not that much better when it comes to hard news. It's a lot of opinion, a lot of, talking heads, a lot of pundits. And the news section of Fox is fine. The people who report news has always seemed fine, but there's just too much chatter. There's too much chitter chatter going on to fill in, 24 hours of a news cycle. So what do you do on a Tuesday when there's nothing else going on? So I don't know. This is why I am skeptical of any of this, like, safety stand down or, the TRADOC generals or the sergeant majors of the army doing, we got to do this, we got to do that, we've got to protect the women, we've got to protect our soldiers, we've got to say that there's no place for extremism. And that's all great, but it's like, putting up a poster that says, don't be racist. What the fuck is that doing for anybody? Like, I just don't think that the army I don't think they understand the scope of the issue. I don't think that and I don't really feel, and I could be wrong, maybe somebody will come to me and be like, no, they've been, trying to find the people who, say things that are only kind of racist, or the things that are like, that like you don't say in polite conversation. You don't say stuff like, we should just fucking, nuke all the Hajis. You don't say that in the normal, like around your family or anything, unless you're a fucking asshole. Which, to be fair, there's probably plenty of those. But anyway, this is just a long-winded way of me saying I don't really believe that anything is going to get like markedly better, but the military from when I joined in 2000 versus me getting out in 2020, it's better. Like, I'm not going to say that everything is worse and terrible, but things are better than they were 4 years ago, but in a lot of ways they're a lot worse too. I think a big problem is that we allow soldiers in garrison, which means the people who are on military bases in the United States, people at Fort Bragg, Fort Bliss, Fort Sill, places like that, they work office jobs, but they're in combat uniforms. That used to not be a thing. We had Class A's, which was your like a suit, which is the green suit that we wore. back in the day. And you had your Class Bs, which was the pants, and then you just had like a shirt, a white shirt. You could put awards on it, but really it was just like your rank was on it, your name tag, maybe one or two little shiny bips and baubles. But for the most part, it was just a working, like this is. It was what you wore to the office. It was if you worked in a nice office, on the outside of the military, if you went into a nice office, what you would wear there: a collared shirt, nice slacks, nice shoes, things like that, things that make you look like a professional. That doesn't happen anymore. We just look like combat soldiers. So even the person sorting your mail and the person, slopping your food, they're still going in their office in their combat uniforms. So that's always been a real sticking point for me. And I really think that, the way forward is that's one of the steps. It's one of the steps of pulling back from the always combat ready mentality. Because when you're constantly in a state of training for combat, especially when you're probably not going to see any combat, that ends up warping your brain into pretty much assuming that everywhere is going to be combat. All right. I've yammered on enough about that. Let's go ahead and get to our reading today. Boop. So, all right. This is another one from Up Against the Bulkhead. I've got two of them. This is only half the page here. There's some more down here. That's fine. We're gonna do our Uprising, and then we're gonna do when you've got the power. When you cut the power, you've got the power. All right. North Carolina, July. On Sunday, July 22nd, at about 6 p.m., an uprising by about 2,000 active duty enlisted men took place that carried on well into the night. Fort Bragg is home of the 82nd Airborne Division, an elite division whose dual purpose is intervention in foreign wars and riot control at home. So yeah, if you're not busting heads in Vietnam, you're busting heads at home. Again, you're just always combat ready. The 82nd saw early service in Vietnam. It had the highest per capita rate of a heroin addiction of any in the Army, no doubt there, and did riot duty in Washington, D.C. in May of 1972 and at the Republican Convention in August of 1972. There's been morale problems for years, and on July 22nd, the EMs, the enlisted men, showed how they felt. The lights and all electricity went out around 6:30 in the evening. Almost immediately, GIs started pouring out of the barracks and other buildings, yelling, singing, and shouting. In preparation for such an opportunity, GIs had stashes of flares, firecrackers, and artillery simulators, which they brought out and put to good use to provide sound effects. Don't know how anybody managed to get... They keep things under a little bit more lock and key these days, because they just don't want dipshits like me and every other Army person getting a bunch of explosives. The EMs were able to keep the MPs at bay with a barrage of bottles and bricks and by rigging barricades with wire. Trash fires were lit, but no buildings were burned. Black, white, and brown GIs were involved in the uprising, and no one saw them fighting each other. They were protesting the brass and the army. The rebellion seemed to have been a spontaneous reaction to the general oppression at Bragg. One of the main factors was Bragg's concept of division-ready forces. Some units for 2 months at a time are required to be ready to leave the base at any time. They must keep their gear packed at all times, often have leave restricted or canceled, and are often dragged out of bed for surprise musters at odd hours of the night or morning. Many of the participants of the riot were on DRF status. So, that is not... So... division ready forces. That was something that, because at any point in time they might need to suddenly get another division into Vietnam, so soldiers had to be ready to go at any given time. Usually it was like a 48-hour kind of turnaround. They don't really do that anymore, thankfully. I have seen people get deployed that quickly, but it's very, very, very small groups of people, and those were generally people who knew they were on a list to go anyway, and some of them had kind of volunteered for it. This is draft years, man. That wasn't... There weren't too many people saying, "Oh yeah, send me. That'll be great." When it was clear the EMs were in control, General Khorasan, commander of the 82nd, figured it was time to talk. When he got to the scene, EM sat him down. EM sat him down and made him listen to their demands. Bad food, inhuman working conditions, such as the DRF says, and base conditions. They complained about the number of jumps. The 82nd requires jump training, and the constant saluting of the press. I mean, I get it because they're drafted, and this sucks. Like, like I'm laughing because it's like soldiers having to do soldier shit. But like now, if somebody's like, I have to salute all these assholes, motherfucker, you join the army. That's what we do. We salute the captains, no matter how shitty they are. You salute them. That's just how it goes. But these guys are drafted, and I mean, I know there's like they're trying to like peg something in there, but this list of demands is really sounds like a lot of just like. You know, like when you run for school president and you promise to put soda in the drinking fountains, kind of like that. Khorasan, of course, denied everything and said their complaints were unjustified. Meanwhile, several colonels had sought out the more militant GIs and pulled them aside to talk, taking some spark out of the uprising. At 11:30, a heavy thunderstorm broke, driving everyone to seek cover. The total damage has been estimated at $2,000. I mean, I understand there's inflation, but still. There were no arrests and no injuries. All right. Thanks largely to the ingenuity of GIs in keeping the MPs away. The G1 underground paper at the base, the Bragg Briefs, is following up on the rebellion by discussing the issues that led to the uprising and distributing leaflets about it. And it's got a P.O. box and a phone number you can call. I mean, these have like real phone numbers. 919. I wonder what would happen if we called those. All right. So let's get to our other one. This is great. This is an assembly line being taken captured. I'm going to go back. I'm going to find the Bragg Brief one and see what else I can find about this uprising. This is the 70s, so this is like kind of the down slope of the war ish, but still a lot of drafting going on. I think the draft didn't really end until the 80s anyway. All right, Detroit, July 24th. 2 young black workers, quote, hijacked, unquote, control of an entire auto plant, closing down the assembly line for 13 hours. The action was in response to a long string of outrageous firings and threats by a gung-ho supervisor. The Wildcat was also in defiance of the normal grievance procedures at Chrysler Corporation and the United Auto Workers. Isaac Shorter, 25, and Larry Carter, 24, scaled a 10-foot fence and climbed onto the power control area of the plant. They cut off power to the assembly line, and the rebellion began. The company was powerless to remove the men from the power cage because 100 other workers had gathered around it in a protective barrier. Fucking, look, man, look what happens when everybody agrees that something's fucked up. Everybody kind of gets, well, we'll see what they want, but you can at least shut some shit down and get your demands listened to. And this is why, like, every time somebody like complains about like, Black Lives Matter, shutting down the highways or whatever, fuck that. This is the only way that people pay attention is when you fuck with their day. After 13 hours, which cost the company $5 million worth of non-produced Imperials, Chevy Imperials, the strikers' demands were met. They focused on speed-ups of the line and the heavy-handed tactics of a racist white supervisor, Tom Woolsey. His prejudice against black workers in the plant and his concern for keeping the line going led Woolsey to fire people who complained, to threaten workers with lead pipes, and to fire workers for being 2 minutes late after break, and to remove benches from the plant so the workers couldn't sit down on break. Chrysler officials brought the strikers a signed statement saying that Woolsey had been fired and that no reprisals would be taken. The sweet victory found the 2 men being carried out of the Chrysler East Jefferson plant on the shoulders of their fellow workers. Shorter commented, "Every minute we were there, we were costing the company money, and we weren't going to leave. When you cut the power, you've got the power." Both men were back on their jobs the next day, but a week later, Isaac Shorter was fired because he continued to organize within the plant. He is presently taking legal action against Chrysler to get his job back, saying they haven't heard the last of this. This is interesting. I can't remember if I talked about it, but I had a book about kids that went on strike, kind of stemming from the newsboy strike of 1899. There were coal plants, and coal plants back in the 1800s hired kids to basically the miners would bring all the coal up, and then they wanted these coal chutes, and then the kids would go in and they would pick out the coal and put the coal and then the chaff, whatever the rock that isn't coal, separating it. So apparently, in the picture, these kids are like basically sitting. The coal comes down around their feet, and then they just do what they need. Apparently, they had a supervisor that was brutal and would beat them and yell at them and not let them take their breaks and not let them, basically being a huge asshole. And the kids ended up, they just said fuck it and they left. They all left and they went swimming. They were boys, they're young boys, so they all went for a swim. And of course, one part of a plant being suddenly shut down means everything shuts down. Like, you can't do anything else. If like somebody isn't constantly picking the coal out and clearing those chutes, then miners can't bring it up. So the supervisor, or the not the kid's supervisor, but like, the plant boss, the boss. He came and just like yelling at them to get back to work, and they're just like, no, go fuck yourself. And he said, well, what can I do to bring you back to work? And they thought about it for a minute. They're like, you got to fire the guy who supervises us. Like, you got to get somebody who's not going to beat us and yell at us and basically abuse us. Now, abuse in the 1800s against kids was a little bit different than what we think of it now. But like, if you listen to what these kids were saying, they were getting the shit kicked out of them on a regular basis. So the boss is like, well, no, we're not going to fire him, but we'll send him to a different plant, and we'll not put him in charge of kids. We'll put him in charge of something else. And the kids are like, cool. As long as he is not there, we will continue to do our job. So, everybody gets together, and like, that's what it was. Like, this guy, we've been complaining, we've been telling you, and it's not until it suddenly starts costing the company money that, the guy, they fired the guy. Maybe they did, or maybe they just moved him somewhere else. I don't know what truly happened to Woolsey, but the fact that they didn't go, immediately back on strike again must mean that he at least wasn't giving them any shit. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that guy was gone for good and nobody had to deal with him. So I think that's where we're going to go ahead and leave it off for this week. We're almost at a half hour. These are getting longer and longer. These are almost full podcasts. And maybe eventually we will start getting to these up to maybe 35, 40 minutes or so, and just release the audio out or something. I don't know. This is all still, I'm trying 2021. I'm trying to be better about putting more stuff out and getting more content out. So we're working on that. We're slowly but surely going to get there. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for getting here to the end. As always, you can follow us on Twitter. You can get us on Patreon for our extra episodes. But we always have our free episodes, one every week on Wednesdays, talking sometimes about the military, usually about the military. But we like to keep it kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Just because, hey, man, if we had to talk about the military, Nate and I aren't in the Army anymore, man. And sometimes it can be really like, it can be a real fucking drag to constantly have to talk about, like, oh, there's Nazis in the Army again. What is it, 2007 all over again? Anyway, thanks, and we'll talk to you next week.